Hi everyone, I'm Jessica Beck. I'm the Milton Fine Curator of Art at the Andy Warhol Museum, and I'm here still in my home in Pittsburgh, and hopefully we'll all be free soon. But in the meantime, I'm here to talk today about Andy Warhol's America. So I'm continuing this series on looking very closely at Andy Warhol's publications. And this is a really fun book, actually. I might have said that about the others, but I really mean it about this one. So it was originally published in 1985, and the edition that I'm holding up is a reprint from 2011. And as I've highlighted before, the lovely Lucy Mulroney in her Andy Warhol Publisher book highlights the original cover, which I don't have a copy of the original. We have one at the museum, but sadly I am still not in the museum. So in the original print, you can see here, it actually had this image of the Statue of Liberty covered in scaffolding to have it cleaned and restored from the salt water. But it's just interesting to think, one, in this reprint, that image is gone almost entirely. I don't think it's in this copy. And instead you have this aerial view of the Statue of Liberty looking down. An interesting loss in this reprint. But Andy Warhol's America is somewhat of a hodgepodge of all of these books I've been talking about. There are quotes in here from something like the Philosophies, which we've already discussed. Also POPism, there's pieces, some of the Warhol biography information from POPism shows up in parts of America, but Warhol really didn't write this one. So he was probably the most hands-off with this book than any of the books that I've been talking about. And it was Craig Nelson, who was an editor with Harper and Row, who was the one that actually came up with the idea. He had the proposal and the title and pieced together a lot of the text in here. And he even was the one who selected a lot of the photographs. Mine has a bunch of Post-its in it, but you can see there are hundreds of photographs, muscly men, people working out at the gym, celebrities, this sort of 10-year final view of Warhol's career. And another book that I've talked about before is Contact Warhol, which really dives very deeply into this archive of photographs that Warhol took during this final 10. In Contact Warhol, they cover the final 10, 11 years. But the really fascinating thing is on one of the final pages in here, you have these funny Warhol lookalikes. And in Contact Warhol, you can actually see not only the diary entry from this day that these photos were taken in December, but you see the original contact sheet here. And also on this contact sheet is John Gould, that late boyfriend that I love talking about. He's a mystery man, but he shows up a lot in this 80s material. But the writing in here, who knows how much of it is Warhol, but it does sound very much like Warhol. And at this point, there's almost a Warhol brand taking place by 1985. So I just want to read you one passage that feels exceptionally contemporary for this moment that we're living in, this kind of social media, online presence kind of way. And here you have Warhol talking about these ideas. He says, "For any part of the media, the person who's getting interviewed always puts on their public media personalities. They're always incredibly active, perfectly balanced, gung-ho, well-rounded, vim and vigor kind of people who only say the things public people are supposed to say. That's everything's just great, or maybe things used to be a little bad, but now they couldn't be better, that living life is wonderful 24 hours a day, that they know deep in their hearts that things are always going to get better and better, that their personal story and their work and anything you could think of is just perfect. But no matter how perfectly someone's got their public personality going, it's never as good as their real life. You never get to hear that some parts of being successful aren't so great, or that the overnight success took working like a dog all the time for 20 years, or that someone who's doing really well on the outside is working like crazy to overcome lots of problems on the inside." This final part is the best part. "With people only in their public personalities and with the media only in the now, we never get the full story about anything. Our role models, the people we admire, the people American children think of as heroes, are all these half people. So if you have a real life, you can get a lot of crazy ideas from this information. You can think you're a real loser, and you can think if only you were rich or famous or beautiful, you would be perfect too. The media can turn anyone into a half person, and it can make anyone think that they should try to become a half person as well. And in an interesting way, this is paired with a Michael Jackson image. So I love that quote in particular, but one thing that Lucy highlights in her book in a really great way is the fact that Warhol went on tour for a lot of these books. So here's an image of the Philosophies, A to B and Back again, with Halston, the fashion designer, and Victor Hugo, who set up this window display. But Kim Gordon, who we actually worked with last summer, we co-curated with Ben Harrison, my colleague of performing arts, Lo-Fi Glamour, and this was an LP that we put out instead of a catalog. And Kim Gordon actually talked about how in California she met Warhol at one of these signings. She can't remember if it was Philosophies or POPism, but I have a feeling it was probably the Philosophies because of the date. And so she didn't have her book with her, but she got boots signed instead with Warhol signature, and we had those boots in the exhibition. And so she talks a lot about how POPism was a really important book for her at the beginning of her career in New York, and Dan Graham, the conceptual artist, gave her a copy of it. So Warhol has this legacy with contemporary artists that is really fascinating. But the tour for America did not go well. And Warhol talks about this in the diary. So you can read about it in this really kind of stunningly personal passage from October 30th, 1985. And I'll just read parts of it because it goes on for quite a long time. And he says, "Okay, let's get it over with. Wednesday, the day my biggest nightmare came true." And so Warhol doesn't say it. He says, the diary can write itself, which he usually says about something very painful. For instance, John Gold's death. He says the same thing about that. So you have this editor's note from Pat Hackett in which she describes the events that took place at one of the signings, where a woman waiting in line had gone up to the table and plucked Warhol's wig from his head and threw it over a balcony to someone below, who then ran up the building with Warhol's wig. And so Warhol quickly put over his hood from his hoodie that he was wearing to cover himself, also to protect himself from the shame, because it must have been deeply humiliating. And we know this because his response is a mix of anger and shame. So he says, "I don't know what held me back from pushing her over the balcony." He also says, "There were so many people with cameras." And he goes on to say, "It was so shocking. It hurt physically, and it hurt that nobody had warned me. And I had just gotten another magical crystal, which is supposed to protect me and keep things like this from happening. It was like getting shot again." So, excuse me for going up and down, but it's just, this book is fascinating, and it's a real culmination of many of the books. You can see that Warhol in the 80s is struggling. America was supposed to be a way for him to get his name and notoriety back. It didn't go well. The reviews weren't very good, but I actually love the tone of America, even if it's not fully Warhol. It's this myth of Warhol, and that's really what we're all dealing with now. This idea of a true author was something Warhol was always complicating. So there's even funny passages in here which feel somewhat personal. And one that I'm just going to finish here with is him talking about the beach. And maybe one day we'll all get back to the beach. But when you're young and good looking and you've got a great body, you like to go to the beach and show it off. And it's easy for you to make fun of everybody there who isn't so good looking or in such good shape. But I think it takes a lot of courage to be really fat or have white skin that never tans or be really old and go to the beach. You wear your bathing suit and show yourself off anyway, and you have the attitude that this is what I am, and it may not be great, but it's me, and I really don't care what you think about it. And that's a great American kind of courage. So Warhol was quite funny, deadpan, lots of sarcasm. America brings that side of him out. There's a lot of humor in here. There's some complicated comments too. You get some privilege. You get the side of privilege with Warhol and some of his discussion about class and in America. But it's a fascinating book. It's fun. you can have a little bit of a laugh, and we all need that now. So stay safe, everyone, and there might be another video coming of another book, and I hope you've enjoyed these, and leave us your comments. Thank you. Bye.